thank you for joining us this evening.
Blimey, yes.
Yes, it's just been a couple of years since you visited us. Just a quick catch-up.
Okay.
What's been going on in life and any updates you want to give us since the couple of years we've been here?
Oh, God. What have I done since I was last here? I think when I was last here, I was just about to do my very last run of Doctor Who. It carried on, you know, to great acclaim. So, damn, that's how indispensable I was. And then I did Dracula, and then there was this pandemic thing. I don't know if you had that in Oxford too, but it was really awkward. And so the various shows I was working on were all delayed, but we've now been working on them. So an adaptation of The Time Traveller's Wife for HBO, which has just wrapped in New York. A new show called Inside Man with David Tennant and Stanley Tucci, which I wrote, which we've just wrapped on in Farnborough. And still making a show I didn't write, written by a brilliant young writer called Tom Moran. Brilliant young writer, he's about 30, but hey, that's young by my standards. Which stars Peter Capaldi, showing that I do aftercare for Time Lords. They don't need it, frankly, but I do. So it was, we had Peter Capaldi in one studio, and the next studio we had David Tennant.
Amazing.
Awesome.
That sounds cool. You mentioned the pandemic occurring and something that we cannot ignore. And in that time, there's been obviously cuts in to the drama and the art society and arts industry in general. I wonder what you feel like the effect of COVID has had on both TV and film, and whether that effect is going to be good for the long term or worse off.
I don't know. I think it's early to guess on that, because it's not really over, is it? And you only understand something when you look back on it. I think one of the problems of trying to assess the dramatic impact of this is it's tragic and it's frightening and it's boring. It's the most boring most bored I've ever been while afraid. You know, it's just stuck in your damned house. There's nothing to write about. I thought for years that I would write amazing stuff if people stopped interrupting me and I could just sit at home and get on with it without all these people yattering on at me. And then that happened. They literally shut down everything. And I couldn't write at all. So when people ask me now, where do you get your ideas from? I just say, outside. I get them from outside, from walking along the street, overhearing a conversation or seeing something through a window. I find it horrible from that point of view. And when I complained to my old friend Mark Gatiss about the fact that despite being more or less chained to my desk, I couldn't write a word, and why was this? He said, Stephen, I do think there's a difference between a sabbatical and a global emergency. Take it from Mycroft, he's right. But yeah.
Yeah, your writing practices are quite peculiar in that you mentioned that, especially after you wrote Joking Apart, how that was inspired after the breakdown of your first marriage. And in that response, you mentioned how you get inspiration from the world around you. To what degree do you pull from the world around you? To what degree is your work basically a reflection or some cathartic expression of your interpretation of your experiences in your own life?
I don't think you have a choice as a writer, whatever you're writing about. You are writing about what you're preoccupied by and what recently happened to you. You don't do it consciously. And some people here must be thinking, for God's sake, he wrote Doctor Who for years. How could that possibly be drawn from his West London lifestyle? Well, in some operatic way it is. It just all bleeds through. And sometimes you don't notice for years. You look at something and think, oh, that's what I was fussing about there. I don't think you have a choice. However it transmutes and however unrecognizable it becomes, you are writing about what you think. I mean, the thing I always, or quite often say to people is, you're not trying to write for anybody else because you genuinely don't know what other people like. You can't buy your own wife the right birthday present, so how the hell are you going to work out what complete strangers want to watch on television, right? It's impossible. You can write what you think and what motivates you, and whatever you're drawn to, you will notice over time is something to do with what's going on in your life. And yeah, that's pretty tough to bring that back to the Weeping Angels, I know. But it is, somehow it is.
Right. You mentioned about people sort of like not being able to connect, you being from West London or living in West London, at least currently, to the work you do. Of course, listening to you right now, I don't quite hear a West London accent. Could you tell us about your Scottish roots and how that has influenced the way you've progressed in both in the arts world and navigating moving down to London?
I always think it's kind of hard to answer a question like that, isn't it? Because I've only ever been me. I don't know what I'd have been like if I was English. But I don't know. I mean, one of the nice things about the English, well, a very nice thing about the English, is they really like you if you're Scottish. You do. They do. I mean, you're nuts, because we are incredibly rude about you all the time. And you are so nice in return. And I think, you know, over time I've come to think that reflects rather badly on us and rather well on you. So having even my rather weak accent it's never been a disadvantage. Scots do brilliantly in England. They really do. I mean, I don't know why the English put up with us from that point of view, because we seem to get all the main jobs. And we've got, what, 3 Doctor Who's are Scottish? I mean, come on, that's an unreasonable number. So I don't, in terms of how different I am because I grew up in Scotland, I have no idea. But it certainly isn't a disadvantage. And, you know, it's I don't know, it's quite nice to come from the little country as opposed to the larger one, I suppose. But
everyone likes an underdog, definitely. Going back and sticking with like your formative years in Scotland, of course, you studied at University of Glasgow and got a master's in, no doubt, English. And of course, that's when you got involved in television through societies you worked with then. I'm sure you're aware and familiar with recent governmental cuts to humanities and arts. What's your view on what that could do for the creativity of the field? Do you think it could spur a much more creative reaction, or are you somehow in despair about the future of arts in that sense?
Wouldn't it be a wonderful world? Wouldn't it be a crazy paradise if by cutting money from anything it got better? Wouldn't that be awesome? I'd have sold everything if I could do that. Imagine how popular you'd be. The system of cuts, everything's going to get better. Vote for me. Now that I think on it, that is how people campaign. But, I mean, despair, never. Worry, yes. I mean, human inventiveness and creativity gets around all the time. It always does. And I don't know if your reference to cuts meant that things like student television wouldn't exist. Is that the case? Or?
Not just that, the inspiration to want to go to that, the view that maybe there's a career that is viable in that, given that there isn't much maybe mentors or people who are funded to nurture people into that direction.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure that, I mean, I think there are more opportunities than there have ever been. As I was saying to a few of you earlier, there's more television being made now than there ever has been in the past. We went to student television and made student television programs because the alternative was an 8mm camera without sound. And I'm not joking. That's what I used to make. I used to make Sherlock Holmes and Doctor Who stories on my 8mm camera with my sisters playing the roles. That's not a lie. I really did. Now, on your iPhone, you have better equipment to make TV shows than we had once a week in Glasgow University student television. So, in one sense, things have got better. And despair is not the way to think. I think there's I sort of know where you're going with that, and the idea that you would ever undervalue or diminish the importance of the arts is nuts. Of course it is. Of course it is. Of course I hate that. But I have faith and confidence that people do find the workaround. And it's not such an unviable career choice now, getting into media. It used to be something you discourage people from doing, but my God, there's a lot of stuff going on. So there's good and there's bad. But let's focus on the good, eh? You've got a whole life to lead, so you might as well do that.
So, Doctor Who. I wanted to start with what you think about the return of your good friend Russell T Davies as returning to Doctor Who, and also perhaps what you think it says about where Chris Chibnall has taken the show.
I don't know how the two things are related at all. I don't understand, but there's only going to be, I say this with trepidation, so many people who can do it at all. I know this is very self-serving, but that's a tough job, and you need to know a lot. And also you need to be willing to give over your life for several years in ways that are not healthy or useful to the rest of your existence. It was, seriously, it's like no other job. You just say goodbye to whole aspects of your life. You screw up every holiday, every dinner, every outing with your kids. Doctor Who screws it up for for however many years you do that mad job. So there's only so many people who are, one, capable of doing it. He said immodestly, that's just horrible, but you know what I mean. And even narrower band of people, people who are willing to do it, willing and capable. There's just not that many. As to, I mean, what I think about, I had no idea Russell was going to do that. He told me the night before. He sent me an email, and I read it. I was just coming home from a restaurant, and I thought, is that real? I'll see if that email's still there in the morning and see if that's real. And then I phoned him up, and I said, have you read The Writer's Tale? Have you read it? Because I think you should. But he said, oh no, I want to do it again. I'm excited, I'm thrilled. And he told me his plans, and so fantastic. I mean, he's the best, he's the single best writer in television drama, and he wants to do Doctor Who again. Great news for Doctor Who. I don't know how I tie that into Chris, but you know, Chris has done an amazing job and given us a whole new, different, expanded version of Doctor Who. So, I think Chris has said to me in the past, not easy to find a successor. Not easy. A lot of people that you might think, well, you could do that, don't want to endure the years of slavery that it entails. But fantastic that Russell's going to do it again. Fantastic. He's an amazing writer. So, and he's got he sounds, when I spoke to him, really energized and up for it. So my only regret is we don't get more shows like It's a Sin and so on, because, you know, I love it when he just does some sort of one-off where he makes a big statement about something, you know, which we won't get for a few years, because the big statements in Doctor Who tend to be, my army awakes, Doctor, which isn't the same thing, really, is it? So, fantastic. Hooray for Russell.
The workload that comes with being a Doctor Who writer is something that you've just pointed out. And I guess to your advantage in the industry, you're known as quite a determined, hardworking workaholic in some regard. I wonder to what degree you'd say that even though the Doctor Who writer and director role is such a tough task, how has basically working on Doctor Who and Sherlock at the same time concurrently affected like the mental health aspect behind the scenes? And what advice would you give for like aspiring writers in safeguarding that precious side to themselves whilst they're giving so much stuff they love?
Well, the trouble is, from a career point of view, I would be saying be prepared to do more and give more than anybody else. If I was to give advice on mental health, and I have no idea why anyone would request my advice on mental health, I would say don't do Doctor Who and something else. And don't do Doctor Who and something else that turns out to have a roughly similar profile. Don't do that, because you will go mad. You will go a bit mad. I read some of my old emails, I have a sort of hobby. I sort of go back and say, I'll just choose a day at random and see what I was emailing about in the height of the storm. Oh my God, absolute loony. I don't mean I wasn't being nasty or aggressive or anything, but sometimes I think, I don't know what I'm going on about. And I'm me, and I should know what I'm going on about. It's, you know, if you, look, come on. I survived. They paid me quite a lot of money. It's not terrible. And you know, if you want to get quite a lot of money, you're probably going to have to screw up some evenings. I think that's probably the reality.
Yeah. So do as I say and not as I do. I said, so do as I say and not as I do. Yeah. So now that, I guess, T. Russell's returned, and last time you came to the union, you said that, you know, once you're gone, you're gone. Yeah. Are you tempted to maybe, you know?
I've only just left. I mean, it feels like yesterday. I think Doctor Who fans would be throwing themselves off buildings if I came back. No, it's not. It's not in my immediate plans. No, I mean, for Russell, Doctor Who's over 10 years ago. For me, it's what is it? 4 years? Something like that. 3 or 4 years. And I mean that really does at my age feel like yesterday. It doesn't feel, I haven't got perspective on it yet. Maybe the beginning of the Matt Smith stuff starts to feel like a different life, but it feels like nothing ago that I was doing it. So I think I'm really curious to see what Russell's second go round is like, what he does now, because, you know, being the restless man he is, it won't be the same as the first time. Don't think you know what you're going to get. You don't. I mean, I knew a little bit because we chatted, but he wouldn't be doing this unless he could scare the living shit out of you. So it will be great. It will be great.
So in your writing, you also get involved in directing. The typical things normally is asked, you know, what is your favorite, maybe Sherlock or Doctor Who episode that you directed? I wonder what your thought is on the inverse. Which one did you not like, or which one did you least enjoy?
Well, the trouble is I can't ever answer that question because I'd upset somebody else. You know, other people work in those things. And I once admitted to one element of Doctor Who that I really didn't think I'd done a good job on. And I had about 3 emails, all of them tear-stained, from people who'd worked on that with me, saying, but I thought that's what you wanted. And I'm saying, yeah, I'm blaming myself, not you. But are you saying my one contribution to Doctor Who wasn't any good? I was like, oh, Jesus. So I don't answer that question. You know, I am vastly skeptical of every contribution I've ever made to anything at all. Except for the very, very rare occasions where I like what I've done. And that's really rare. Now, I'm not particularly special in that regard. Everybody thinks that way. You mostly don't think you're any good. And you're almost certainly right.
Well, there are always skeptics out there, and I guess self-doubt is a contributor to that. For the shows that you're involved in, Doctor Who, Sherlock, there's a loud and very passionate array of people who are fans of it, and they make their opinions pretty heard when they do feel it. Do you feel pressure to appease both critics and fans, or how do you react to their opinions and suggestions?
Well, obviously, 4 years after the fact, I can now give some kind of wise and tolerant response to that. In the storm of it, it's really difficult. It's really difficult to disassociate yourself from anybody who expresses a public opinion about a popular show. Because do you know what most people do with the popular show? I mean, like 99.9% of people do with a show they love is they never express an opinion in public at all. Right, so you don't know what almost 100% of the audience thinks. You don't know. And what you are doing is taking the worst possible sample of people, all of whom, I don't mean that they're the worst people, just it's the worst constructed sample you could have, the worst way of choosing who to listen to. The other thing is, and I know this from myself, the way I behave, if you're a fan of something, you don't tell the truth. You don't ever tell the truth. I mean, what's the truth about me and, say, James Bond films? I love James Bond films. I like them if they've got James Bond in them. And he says, Bond, James Bond. And the music comes up, and there's that gun barrel bit at the beginning. That's what I like. But if I'm talking to other James Bond fans, I'll pretend that I don't think Man with the Golden Gun is canonical. I don't think that one's any good. It's absolute trash, that one. I don't think that. I think it's awesome. Of course it's awesome. It's got James Bond in it. Right? So that's what fans lie. In a perfectly amiable way, they set out their stall. They always say, this one's a classic and this one's trash. They think it's all great. I think it's all great. That's what I was saying earlier, as far as Doctor Who's concerned, I'm actually quite an uncomplicated Doctor Who fan. I kind of like all of it, really. But if you go back over my history, I used to declare that bits of it weren't any good. It was a total lie. I loved all of it. So there you go. I don't think you can listen to that voice, those voices. And I should know why you don't listen to that voice, because that voice is kind of me. It's me enjoying being a fan and trying to say the most outrageous thing. You know, that's what you do. You say the most outrageous thing. Well, obviously, David Tennant is the worst Doctor. Really? Is he? Oh, come on. Sean Connery was hopelessly miscast as James Bond. Was he? Was he really? Do you know what I mean? You just want the big sort of counterintuitive, attention-getting remarks. You kind of got to... I mean, it's a perfectly good sport, but you can't use it as audience research.
Thank you. On the topic of canonical and who is or isn't the best James Bond, since you mentioned that you're not going back anytime soon, I'm just wondering, in an imaginary alternative universe, if you were somehow in charge of Doctor Who today, being aware of what the critics and the fans' view of who the next Doctor Who should be, who would you perhaps cast as the next Doctor Who?
Oh, do you know, I've given up on fantasy Doctor Who casting. I did it twice, do you know, for real. The only difference being an ex-showrunner makes to my fandom, as it were, is that I don't play at it. I've done that. So I'm just fascinated to know who's cast. Because I was talking to Russell the other day, and he started that conversation, I go, just surprise me. I don't care. I don't want to know. I want to sit in the audience.
Superb. I'm going to ask one last Doctor Who question, and hopefully open the floor to more questions soon. So Series 5 saw an explosion of viewership. So Doctor Who Series 5 saw an explosion of viewership in the United States, and I was just wondering how that affected your writing in order to cater for a much more wider and perhaps economically influential international audience.
Never at all. I never thought about it. And I don't think you should. I mean, how would I know, it's the point I was making earlier, how would I know what, I don't know, Americans want to watch? I haven't a clue. I don't know what British people want to watch. How did I suddenly know what they wanted to watch? I mean, it's just nonsense. I would argue, and it applies to Sherlock and Doctor Who, they're two of the most painfully British shows you could ever see, and they're worldwide hits. I think when I watch an American show, I want it to be American. I want them to occasionally use words I don't understand and talk about Congress and the Senate and all that. And are they not the same thing? And it took me years to find out what Thanksgiving was. I thought they had 2 Christmases. So I want things from other cultures to be as much them as possible. So I think if you're marketing a British show, if you're sending a British show out there, be as British as you like. People will like that, fine, because it's different. To take America is the big market. Americans get lots of shows made in America. They're not sitting around saying, I wish I had more shows about Americans. They're not doing that. Why would they? Their television is full of it. So you don't ever sort of think, well, cast an American or do any of those things. Just be as British as you like and hope it's any good.
Yeah. On the topic of being more British and perhaps not letting the outside world influence one's creative flair, recently there's been lots of controversies, especially in the general media, but also even more so at BBC, that's led to the cancelling of shows such as Little Britain. And I wonder what your thoughts are on whether you think that's the right course of actions, that's the right course of action in making TV much more inclusive, or perhaps are we making a mistake?
Are you trying to lure me into the culture war? Thanks, no. I don't know. I don't know what to say about any of that. I genuinely don't know. I think if more people just said, I don't know, it might be going better. And if everybody stopped shouting, it would certainly go better. But, you know, in 1 minute you say, well, it's absolutely ridiculous they're cancelling that show, or we don't get to see that show anymore. Then you watch some old film and say, Jesus Christ, what is this? And I used to watch this in the list. So I think there is a perfectly reasonable case on both sides and way too much damn shouting. But I don't really know that much about it, and I'd rather not be involved in it since it just seems to be an endless sucking pit, doesn't it? So can I not? I don't know. Some old shows are really awful. Some old shows are really awful and really good at the same time. What do you think? Go on.
I just said, I don't know either. Brilliant. So I'd like to open the floor for some questions. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand up and the mic will come to you. Remember to say your name and your college when you're picked. Right, so I recognize the member in the yellow jacket.
Hi, I'm Satar from Somerville College. And I just wanted to ask, Sherlock was a brilliant series, and especially when you read the books, you realize that there are a lot of factors that are integrated into the show. So I wanted to ask how to make a show that familiar and also new and different on the same time, and how difficult that is.
Do you know, that wasn't difficult. That element of it's not difficult because the original is brilliant. The original is absolutely toweringly brilliant. And if anything, if Mark and I had any thought at all, it was people don't know how brilliant this is. They've missed loads of it. So we're fanboys, obviously. Gosh, there's a surprise. And so we're thinking, we can pick out the bits that everybody else has been missing and display them. All right, you've got the big attention-getting thing of it's set in the modern day. As you perfectly well know, it doesn't make any difference at all, does it? It doesn't matter whether it's Victorian or modern. You don't ever worry about James Bond running around now when he should be 90, do you? I mean, it's not an issue for anybody. So, no, that was a pleasure to constantly harvest those stories, which are so much more detailed and so much more interesting and clever than people remember them as being. So it was just like, it was a treasure trove. So many times people would say to me, that was great what you did with Sherlock Holmes. And I said, that's from the original. I remember one of my oldest friends said, he calls himself a consulting detective. That's so clever. I said, that's what he calls himself in the book. So it was the opposite of difficult, I'd say.
Thank you. I recognize the member with the checkered jacket.
Hi, Stephen. I'm sure this is a question that you get a lot. What is your all-time favorite piece of film or TV and why?
Well, I've got several in rotation. I absolutely adore The Princess Bride. I think if we're to take it on how many times have you watched it, that might be it. Also, The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes. The Billy Wilder film, which if you like Sherlock, you must go and watch because it's kind of the source text of that. There's quite a few things I absolutely adore. I mean, Doctor Who itself and Sherlock Holmes are things that I've loved all my life. So those are, and I mean, I like all the things that everybody likes too. I mean, everybody's correct about The Godfather, but everyone knows about that one, right? So all the things that everybody likes, I like too. But if you haven't seen The Princess Bride, maybe go and watch that. So that maybe that because when I'm feeling miserable, I go and watch the the sword fight on the cliff tops of Insanity, just to cheer myself up. Maybe that's the one. I adore that film. It is, and I adore the work of William Goldman, the screenwriter of that. He's the best screenwriter ever. Absolutely extraordinary. So I'll choose that one today. If you ask me tomorrow, it would be completely different.
Thank you. Yes, the member with the black jacket.
Hi, I'm Mohammed from Pembroke. I guess cheers for doing this. And I had a bit of a niche question. I was kind of wondering, when you're writing, how do you balance the short-term plot of the episode with the long-term plot across a series?
Badly. To be honest with you, and I don't think many people are very honest about this, always favor the short-term plot, because that's what people remember and people will love. The long-term plot, if it has to alter to accommodate the short-term plot, just do it. Just do it. So I balance it that way. I balance it. I tried in Doctor Who a couple of times, maybe once really in season 6, my second one, to have a much more complicated arc, as it were, as people horribly call it. You've got an arc. And I thought in the end, it just gets in the way. It gives you a set of obligations. So that's the only time I ever really did it. After that, I went back to the Russell model of instead of an arc, you just do frequent mentioning. Bad wolf. Bad wolf, I mentioned that's an arc. Or in my case, what was it? The vault and what's in the vault? Well, obviously Missy, so I gave up early. What was it? Maybe it's a hybrid, okay. Maybe I'll just say hybrid every so often and that'll be an arc. But at least it gives you something to peg the last episode on. Now we'll find out what all that frequent mentioning was about. If you are depending on people remembering every detail from 6, 7, 8 weeks ago, you're always going to be disappointed. So, also, the longer you give people months, if you give people months to work out their own ending, they'll always be disappointed by yours. So there's not an awful lot to favor that. I would say the job of television is to favor the story of the week. I'm very interested to see what Chris, who's a master of the long form, does with a 6-part Doctor Who story. He's very clever with long form, cleverer than I am. He did such a beautiful job on Broadchurch. I'm really interested to see what he comes up with that. When I first tried to persuade him to do the job, I thought, when I was going home, I said to Sue, I bet he does a long form story. I bet he does a serial as opposed to what we normally do. So I'm really intrigued to see what happens on Sunday. Always anyway. But, go on.
Thank you. I recognize the lady with the red jacket. On the front row.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, I'm Millie from Christchurch. I've been a fan of Sherlock for a long time, and I just wondered, my favourite bits in the episodes is when Sherlock does the really long deductions, and I just wondered, how long did they take to write? What was your process in writing? And did Benedict hate you every time you gave them to him?
They're monstrous. They're monstrous from every angle. They're really hard to do when we are trying to work out deductions that make any kind of a sense. It's a game of bluff. Let's be honest. They all are. But if you can make it sound persuasive, so Sue, Mark, and I would go around, and every time we thought of one, we'd sort of put it in an email chain and say, "There's one." Sue did a great one on how to walk into a flat and see and work out if someone's left-handed, which we used, I think, in The Blind Banker. So we used to have a sort of storehouse of them, of things that sound a bit persuasive, which is the best way of putting it. And then in terms of shooting them, they were a nightmare. They're a nightmare because they're very, very long speeches, but also they are, everything Sherlock Holmes ever does, Doctor Who's a bit the same, is a little bit counterintuitive. He is making leaps that ordinary minds can't make. Therefore, it's hard for an ordinary mind to link one sentence to the next. So they're really, really hard to remember. So we had to, I think the one where he had to do the aeroplane deduction, the numbers in A Scandal in Belgravia. I mean, I think we got to the end of that day and he still hadn't got it. He came in the next morning and got it. But I mean, they are really tough. They are really, really tough from all points of view.
Thank you.
Thank you. The member with the green jacket on the first bench.
Can you hear me? Yeah, cool. I was a really big fan of Series 10 of Doctor Who, but obviously it really only came about because Chris Chibnall couldn't finish season 3 of Broadchurch in time. What was your experience as writing a sort of 6th season of Doctor Who, and how do you keep it fresh, especially when you've been doing it for so long?
Well, I did worry about it. I remember signing on to do it, which I hadn't thought I was going to do. I hadn't thought I was going to do that series. And I signed on, and I went back to my house in Cardiff, because I was staying in Cardiff at the time. And I sort of sat on the sofa and thought, for the very, very first time, I thought, have I got this? Do I have enough ideas? Do I have enough fixes for other people's scripts? Do I have the energy? Do I have the commitment? Do I have the passion to get through it? Because it's so much. And I knew the way things worked out, that was a hell of an ending, because I did 14 Doctor Who's, 12 of the normal series and 2 Christmas specials in the same run, and 3 new Sherlocks in approximately a year. I mean, I was turning out a new script or rewriting a script or overseeing a script, you know, with such frequency. It was absolutely terrifying. And there was a point in the middle where I didn't think I was going to get to the end of it. I felt like my mum died during it. It was all lovely. It was really grim and tough. But the answer to most things is work really, really hard, and luck will smile on you, I think. Just work really, really hard.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Just to follow up to that, with the repetition of working and turning over scripts, I know that, you know, some fans sort of like label and say that they recognize Moffat tropes. Do you think you have your tropes in at all, or do you think?
Every time I see that Moffat tropes, I'm grateful for the plural. Well, yes, I'm like any other writer. I've got things that interest me and things I like to explore. I mean, and things I can do, and sometimes it's very late at night, and you just think, oh, I've got that one. I've got this thing, some of you will have noticed, I'm sure, that I'll repeat whole lines of dialogue from one show to another. And it happens for one of 3 reasons. The good reason is because for some reason at the back of my mind, these 2 shows are related. Maybe something silly, like I had a cold while I was writing both of them, or I was staying in a particular place, or it was on holiday or something. And I want to connect the 2, just in a way that I know about. That's quite cool. Then there's the excusable reason, which is it's 4:30 in the morning, and I need a gag to cover a really improbable plot development, and I've got one in an episode of Press Gang. And I think, well, I'll just have that. It's mine. I'm ripping off myself. I'm allowed. That's the excusable reason. The really worrying one is when I make a brand new joke up from scratch and discover it 7 or 8 years ago, identically phrased in a previous script I wrote, and I have no memory of it.
I want to dig a bit deeper into the tropes, because one thing I noticed with Sherlock and Doctor Who is, in your writing style, the way you centralize the main character and how things work almost around them. It's almost like they're the center of the universe in your style of writing. Do you think that with that, I mean, my version of a trope of yours, do you think that with that style, people are able to connect more with the actor, or is it something that you sort of want to project and send a certain message with? I think
the answer to the question is, what do you think central character is? I mean, I mean, if you've got a show like Sherlock or Doctor Who, which where they orbit around a particular person. If you're doing an ensemble show like I used to do with Press Gang or whatever, or an ensemble show like Coupling, an old sitcom I used to do, then you sort of nominate a different lead every week. But if it is a hero show, and I mean hero in the sense this show is about this person, not because they are necessarily the smartest or the best, sometimes they're not, but because it's their adventures. It's their adventures, and other people come into their orbit and leave their orbit, and that's what Sherlock Holmes is like. Actually, I mean, the Sherlock Holmes stories, it's Dr. Watson, really, who's the main character, because he's telling the story. And in Doctor Who, it's, you know, we don't follow Sarah Jane Smith home after she leaves the Doctor, we stay with the Doctor. So it's just the way that kind of storytelling works. Not a particular thing that I would do. I mean, if you do things like an episode of Sherlock where instead of staying with Benedict and Martin in the flat, we followed another character home and they just got on with being a teacher in a school, people would be asking for their money back pretty damn fast, yeah, you know.
Thank you. Next person I'll look to is the lady just on the fourth row on this side of the room.
Hi, I'm Alice. I'm from Trinity. Thank you for doing this. I should mention I'm a big fan of Doctor Who and Who Society are here to say hello, but my question's actually in regards to your stories that you do, where you take a very classic tale like Jekyll and Hyde or Sherlock or Dracula, and you decide to reinvent it for the modern age. So following on from that, is there a classic story that you're eyeing up and thinking, maybe that could turn into something? Because I'd be very excited to know.
No, is the answer to that. I've done the ones that I hugely care about. So I mean, it was never my intentional career path to do that. It's a sort of fanish impulse. It really is. When you do something like that, when you sort of do a new version of Sherlock Holmes or Jekyll and Hyde or whatever, you are in a way saying, this is what I love about it. This is why I love it. Have you noticed this? That's what you're saying. You know, this property that we all know, this story we all know, I'd like to hold it for a moment and show you what it is I love about it. And I think that's quite a powerful thing to do. But the real genius isn't what you do with it. The real genius is the people that came up with, you know, Doyle coming up with Sherlock Holmes, you know. That's the genius, to have a character that can be viewed, who can be a comedy character, can be a serious character, can be a tragedy, can be a whimsy, all these different things, like James Bond the same, you know, that, you know, you can be from Roger Moore to Daniel Craig and you're still James Bond, you know, and it still counts. That simple but sort of unkillable vision of a character that can go through any prism and still be the same. That's more impressive than creating the variations, which is just being a fanboy.
I'd like to definitely echo that question. I mean, the twist on classical tales, especially one which kind of burns into my memory, is on the third episode of the Dracula miniseries, learning, without giving any spoilers out, perhaps what Dracula's real relationship was with the son, and how that wasn't the same as what I thought through other tales was. I wonder how, when writing these tales, interpreting them in your own way and adding your own flair to them, are you scared, or perhaps, I mean, it takes some bravery to sort of like, you know, have your own stamp on it in a way that people never thought about before?
Well, I mean, all you're risking is people not liking it. As far as bravery goes, it's not very brave indeed, is it? I mean, it's all right. I don't think there's any point in doing a character like Dracula or Sherlock Holmes or any of these things unless you're going to try and find a new sideline. You're doing no harm. The character's still there. If everybody hates what you've done, then they can just go back to their preferred version. There's no harm done because you're doing your version. But it's interesting. I mean, Dracula's a very, very interesting case. Because a lot of the mythology, I mean, this is true of Sherlock Holmes to a degree, but very true of Dracula, around Dracula, it comes after the book. And Dracula in the book has a big, long, droopy moustache. Nobody's ever done that one, I don't think. That's the last thing you'd want is a vampire, isn't it? You're sucking away at some maiden's neck and you go, oh no, look at that, Jesus. James Bond has a scar in the James Bond books. Literally nobody has a scar on his face. Literally nobody has ever gone with a scar. There are things that people just reject from the mythology. Dracula wears a high-collared cape, but that's from the stage show. He always does that now. He always has a high-collared cape. That's from the stage show because they wanted to do a special effect where Dracula disappeared through a trapdoor, so they needed a high-collared cape for it. Dracula in the sunlight. He can go out in the sunlight in the book. It's not a problem for him. That's not true of the book. So we were sort of messing around there saying, that's not the truth you think it is. But we had Dracula join in the general delusion, I suppose. You know, it's fun to do these things because we don't even know why which bits of the mythology adhered and which didn't. As I keep telling people, and they get very bored, Doctor Who's real name was given away in the old series. His real name is Theta Sigma. It's stated in his real name. The entire audience went, no. Go away. We don't know his name. So you're not allowed to do that. So many, many years later, they found a way to retcon it, as they say. But it's interesting. The audience is in control of what sticks. James Bond's scar, nope. Doctor Who's real name, no. Sherlock Holmes would never wear a deerstalker in the middle of town. Yes, he would, because we like him in that, and all those things. So the mythology is interesting.
Thank you. Right, I would like to recognize the member with the glasses on the fourth row on the side of the room.
So Doctor Who and Sherlock have become very present in kind of the cultural zeitgeist, and as a result, they get parodied a lot, and the work gets kind of like poked fun at from various creators from all over. I'm just wondering, how much of that have you seen? Do you have any kind of favorites? How does it feel to kind of have your work kind of poke fun at like that? And also just a separate question, how do you sleep at night knowing that because of you, so many children couldn't sleep at night?
Right. First one. I've seen quite a bit of Doctor Who and Sherlock parodies, and some of them are really, really funny. The one quite early on, I forget who did it, but they did this thing where Sherlock has too many deductions and he can't see for all the words. He's going, I'm blind, there's too many deductions. And Dr. Watson tries to deduce something and he sees nothing except eventually a pair of breasts get drawn on the screen. That's all he can think. So that was brilliant. There was a hilarious little musical number done with Matt Smith's Doctor meeting Benedict's Sherlock Holmes, deciding to fly away together. Very, very funny. I mean, these are shows that are funny anyway. I mean, they're a comedy. I always think Sherlock's a comedy. So it's not a big deal to say we can go funny on this. One of the things we thought about Sherlock Holmes, Mark and I, was Sherlock Holmes is funny. It's very fun. They are funny stories. They make you laugh when you read them. In a good way. So, but yeah, no, I love all that. How do I sleep at night? Children rate Doctor Who, and I was a child watching Doctor Who, on whether or not it is scary, right? They say if it wasn't scary, it wasn't any good, right? If it managed to last through the entire episode and not hide behind something, that's a bad episode of Doctor Who. Doctor Who has as its sacred intent, terrifying children who can't cope with that level of fear. No other TV show's allowed to do this. When I used to get into arguments on Sherlock, saying the Beeb or Sue would say, this is getting a bit grim, and I'd say, we did it at 6 o'clock on Doctor Who, so why can't we do it on Sherlock? It's a different rule for Doctor Who. So, Doctor Who does terrify kids, but it's supposed to terrify kids, and they like that. And the other thing is, kids have nightmares about monsters anyway. What Doctor Who adds is the hero who fights monsters without ever becoming one. It adds to their dreams. It doesn't change them.
I'd like to recognize the member on the second row right there.
Hi, I'm Lexi from St. Cat's.
so this ties in, I promise. I'm getting my DPhil in education and just finished teaching English for the past 8 years to 14-year-olds. And through that responsibility and privilege, I got to see how literature, which includes film and television a lot, how when that goes into their minds, the themes and ideas create their imagination and their ethics and their identity. So I'm wondering, looking at Doctor Who, what, from your legacy, what ideas and themes do you hope young people take away, the ideas and themes that remain?
I slightly think children choose the ideas that they follow because it somehow rhymes with them, you know, rather than that I'm dispensing wisdom, people are finding wisdom. I think that's how it goes. But I think the Doctor's a great hero. I think the Doctor's a marvelous hero, one of the very, very best heroes, because the Doctor is simply kind, and the Doctor is simply clever, and the Doctor never gives up, and the Doctor is always on the side of the weakest and the most fragile. And he's always there, or she's always there. I've got to get used to this. I think that's a great, I mean, there's nothing cruel about the Doctor. And also somewhere you sort of feel that the Doctor is quite ordinary in certain respects. Despite being an exotic person, you know, is also quite ordinary. Can be vain and silly and distracted and eccentric and all those things. But rises above all those petty notions to be amazing when that is required. I always refer to the Doctor as the way the Doctor enters a story. It's not like James Bond being sent on a mission or Sherlock Holmes taking a case. The Doctor is simply a passerby. He's the Doctor, is the passerby who becomes the last man or woman standing. And I think that's a great idea for a hero. Just that. But I don't think that's my legacy. I think that was in Doctor Who long before I got anywhere near it. And the Doctor is the best possible mentor in every amazing way, including those strange frailties the Doctor has.
Thank you. So can I have the member who I can't see their face, but their hand, they're wearing a black. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Polly from St Hilda's, and I was literally obsessed with Doctor Who when I was a kid. And so
what's gone wrong since then?
I still am. But honestly, it was bad. But I know you're a fan as well, and I just wondered if there's any like nice particular moments that you had whilst you were working on Doctor Who that just made you think, yeah, I'm proud I've made it.
Oh, well, I mean, every day was full of them, really. I mean, I never really got tired of seeing the police box perched somewhere new. That was always exciting. I remember, if I have one sort of giddy moment of it, was my very first day on set as showrunner, as opposed to writer. We were filming the scenes on the beach from The Time of Angels. And I got to the location and it's Matt Smith's first day, so he was terrified. So I went out to where we were shooting, and standing on the beach, on this rather white beach, was this perfect blue rectangle of the police box just facing me. It looked sort of unreal. It looked like a postage stamp stuck on a painting of a beach. It just looked so strange. And I walked towards it, and I thought to myself, I've been walking towards that police box all my life. And now I've walked away. But I remember that was quite a thought. If I had one single moment, then that would be that. But I mean, there were loads of moments. I still have them. I think I'm personal friends with quite a few Doctor Who's, so there's that.
We've got time for maybe one more question, and I have to recognize a very enthusiastic member over there.
You've written probably 2 of the most influential drama series of the last 10 years, and you're probably the most, certainly in the top 10, most creative writers and showrunners around anywhere. So just to throw you off kilter, if you had 1 minute, Netflix has given you £100 million to write a show. In 1 minute, what's it going to be about?
Well, hello. I mean, I don't. I honestly, the closest I've come to doing something like that is actually Inside Man, which involves 3 stories twined together that I've been thinking about for years. And so I just sat down and wrote the first episode. I'd sold it quite easily to Netflix and the BBC. So that might be me empty now. I don't know. I don't have, I can never quite do that. I don't think it arrives that way. I think that's what I was saying earlier. It arrives because you overhear something, or you start worrying, what would I do if that happened to me? That's where stories come from. But you know, I'll tell you, the nice thing about being a degenerate old man now, as opposed to, you know, an ambitious young writer, is I just don't think that way. I've had, it's gone all right, okay? It's been okay. I don't feel embarrassed about my failure. So I'm okay with how it's gone. So I'm free to do any whimsical thing I feel like, so provided I can persuade other people to join in. The thing I'm probably most looking forward to is the stage play I've got on in Chichester, starting in May next year. Please all come and see it. It's a very small theatre, you'd fill it. Because I haven't done that before. So I mean, I've lost that mindset of I want the biggest, boldest, maddest thing ever, because I went through several years of doing Doctor Who and Sherlock at the same time. I've done that. And it was nice, often, and sometimes terrible. So sorry, a disappointing answer. But Inside Man is the closest I've come to saying, what are the things that I have outstanding that I would like to write about? And what I set myself was, could you write about all 3 at the same time? And maybe the answer to that would be no, but we'll see. Someone asked me a question about directors. Someone has to ask me a question about directors. You do, because there's a reason. I'll explain when I answer the question. Any question, you. Well, I'm not a director, I'm a writer, but I'm glad. No, the reason I did this, the reason I set you up there is the last time I was here, I did a little comedy thing about directors always taking the credit. And what happened to me just the other day, like 2 days ago, was Paul McGuigan, who's a genius director I often work with, who's working on Inside Man, said, so, my editor just showed me something on YouTube. And I said, what? I said, you at the Oxford Union explaining why directors don't really do anything. So I said, well, if I ever get the opportunity to go back to the Oxford Union, I will say that I think directors are marvelous. They are beautiful and generous and inspirational people. And in particular, Paul McGuigan is gorgeous and sexy and wise, and I've never been more thrilled and transported by the presence of another human being than I have been by the simple presence of Paul McGuigan. Is that enough?
Well, on that note, we have no more time for any more questions. It's been a great pleasure to have you visiting us here today. Everyone, Stephen Moffat.